There's an old joke on the internet which says that every time you mention Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, someone will reinstall it. Joke's on them, I never uninstalled it. Or, actually I did uninstall it. Bloodlines needs no introduction. If you're here, chances are you've played it or have at least seen dozens of videos about it. I made a video about it like 3 months ago. It's pretty decent, I think you should watch it. So what's the deal with this video then? Well, this is the second episode of an irregular series where I choose a game and list 100 things I love about it. It's as simple as that. The first episode was about Deus Ex. It was a ton of fun to make. And since Bloodlines is still fresh in my mind, I figured it's a good candidate for the second episode. In this video, I will focus less on gameplay, which I've covered in detail in my analysis, and more on the cool random details that didn't make the cut in my hour-long Bloodlines video due to, you know, pacing and structure considerations. Additionally, this video will assume some familiarity with Bloodlines. Not total, and I will avoid spoilers just in case you haven't played Bloodlines. I also have a Twitter where I tweet stuff and a Patreon where you can support the channel with real life money. So without further ado, let's get this video started.
What a scene, man! Hoo-wee! Then they just plop you out here like a naked baby in the woods. How about that?
First of all, I love this unhinged character creation quiz. It not only oozes early 2000s goth energy and angst, it also looks like a which Evanescence song you are quiz that a teenager put together on a MySpace after telling their dad to fuck off. Even the clan selection and character creation screens look like an early 2000s internet quiz. Though I assume the intention was to make them resemble a tabletop character creation sheet. I also love the flavor text the game provides for each clan. It does a great job absorbing you into Bloodlines' world even before starting the game. One more thing, Bloodlines' theme. It's so good. It's old news at this point, but Bloodlines' theme is an instrumental track based on Massive Attack's Angel. While we're at it, go ahead and listen to Angel, and you know what, just listen to Mezzanine, it's a great album. During the fledgling's mock execution, Velvet Velour blows a kiss to Maximilian Strauss, which makes him recoil in what I assume is disgust. Now, the game never clarifies whether they're in a relationship, and if they are, why the big Batromir Primogen Strauss is so disgusted by this display of public affection. Strauss doesn't just brush her off, he's like, ew, cooties! Presumably because he's a car-carrying Camarilla member and she's an anarch, or maybe Velvet Velour is just fucking with him. I don't know about the latter because she doesn't come across as the kind of person who would do that. I love Jack's crash course in vampire politics and etiquette. Now, for such a dog-eat-dog world, Jack's willingness to school you is a bit suspicious. Of course, he has a vested interest in your success, but not in the way you'd think. I love that the Santa Monica apartment makes absolutely no sense. For one, I don't see any curtains or blinds to prevent sunlight from entering the apartment. Secondly, this radiator is set up in the most ludicrous spot possible, between the open space kitchen and the apartment's entrance. Very energy inefficient. Thirdly, why are there pizza boxes on the counter? I thought vampires are unable to eat human food. Did LaCroix kick out the previous tenant before bringing the fledgling to live here? I love the fledgling's cocky walk upon exiting his apartment block for the first time. So much swagger. Why does this gentleman near your shitty Santa Monica apartment block have a transatlantic accent? I don't know, but the accent makes this dialogue line even funnier.
I've suddenly got the urge to walk down that dark and foreboding alley over there. Care to join me?
In Mercurio's apartment, whose near-death carcass you witness crawling inside the building at an earlier point, you can see his bloody handprint on the light switch. Very cool detail. Speaking of Mercurio, damn, I love this dude. He's a New York wise guy who pissed off some very dangerous people and ran to the West Coast. He then became an arms dealer and a fixer of sorts for Sebastien Lacroix, the Ventrue Prince of Los Angeles. There's something about the way he carries himself that reminds me of those crime movie side characters that always steal the show. The ones that seem like one-note comic reliefs at first glance, but who actually have more depth to them. I love this item description. I love Nox and how he subverts expectations. I'm not gonna spoil the twist just in case you've never played the game. I love this shady neon lit alleyway by the clinic. You can almost smell the piss and cheap beer and feel syringes cracking under your soles. I love that even though Stanley Gimble's demeanor raises the reddest of red flags from the beginning, this reveal still comes as a complete surprise. I love that scrolling through Vandal's inventory gives you an unobstructed view of his Employee of the Month award. It's funny because, you know, Vandal runs a clandestine blood harvesting operation in the clinic's basement, and by clandestine I mean he outright kidnaps people to harvest their blood. I love that you can blackmail this doctor with evidence of his infidelity extracted from his emails. It's not a huge thing, just a nice bit of reactivity. This lady gives absolutely no fucks.
You're the health inspector? Then I suggest you order something healthy. Like the cheese omelet surprise, Inspector. If the cook doesn't spit in it, surprise.
I love Bertram Tung. He's not only intimately familiar with clan dynamics and political machinations, he actively manipulates them to his advantage. I love how Kilpatrick the bail bondsman grows on you over the course of his questline. He might seem shady at first, but he's actually a pretty decent guy despite his line of work. I love the Asylum Club. Need I say more? I can't play the music because the copyright ghouls are watching, but my god, it screams early 2000s goth culture. I love how the Asylum's bartender will have none of your trauma dumping. I would have played the clip to showcase Jeanette's excellent voice acting were it not for the YouTube police flagging every nugget of diegetic music for copyright infringement, so you'll just have to trust me on this one. I love how the writers foreshadowed the Vorman twins' condition. I love how this jump scare at the Ocean House Hotel still gets me after all these years. I love that despite the fact that Therese tells you that ghosts are harmless, not to mention that you're a nocturnal apex predator, you still can't help but feel scared shitless in the Ocean House Hotel. Creepy children's drawings may be a tired horror trope, but Troika still made it feel fresh somehow. I love this conversation.
That's the kind of thing that makes you lose your faith in humanity.
I gotta say, it's the second worst thing I've ever seen.
Poor bastard down there is torn in two. By the looks of it, you'd think someone tied him to two horses and raced them in opposite directions. What could you have possibly seen that was worse than what's down there?
It was about 3 years ago. Now found this guy on the beach. Looked like, I don't know, an enemy attack.
Shark bite?
Nah, seen shark bites. This was something different. Whatever killed me. Head was missing, hands were missing, and there were these huge slashes, but...
Bullshit.
No, the guy was literally slashed to ribbons. The worst part was, I was waiting for the meat wagon. Someone was watching me. I swear my dad should aid or something. Just get this sight. Just for a second. So I tried to pull out of that place.
Maybe it was a werewolf.
Woo! All right.
Or a vampire.
Get it. See, this is why you didn't get invited to Hernandez's wedding.
If you pay attention to your surroundings on the Santa Monica Pier, you'll notice Beckett, the shape-shifting vampire scholar, stalking you in his werewolf form before disappearing into the night. This Malkavian fin blood on the beach pretty much spoils the game's entire plot. I love that you can scam this hapless fin blood vampire by selling him fake vampirism cures. I never did it, but I'm happy that the option exists nonetheless. In one quest, Nox has you deal with a Kuei Jin. Kuei Jins are basically Asian energy vampires, but not really. In the report that he sent to his superiors, the Kuei Jin comments that taking over Los Angeles will be a walk in the park because Kindred are incapable of forming a united front on account of their tendency to fight over petty shit. I love this moment because you get to see an outsider's perspective on the political dysfunction plaguing Kindred society. I love this stealth kill animation. It's so good. It's so janky. I love your conversation with Beckett following the first main story mission. It's the fledglings and by extension yours first time hearing that since time immemorial, vampire society had been shaped by myths, superstitions, conspiracy theories and half-truths peddled by the powerful and influential to push certain narratives that serve their interests. Looks like humans and vampires are not so different after all. Another interesting thing to note about Beckett is that as a gangrel, he's atypical of his clan. Gangrels are vampires who shun civilization and embrace their bestial nature. Beckett, albeit a loner by nature, is well-spoken, polite, and vampire society's foremost scholar. He's also the only gangrel that the player has a meaningful relationship with in Bloodlines. He is proof that clans are not monoliths and that clan distinctions are not necessarily as clean-cut as you might think. Because Troika had to make a cloth system from scratch, you'll often see trench coats flailing around in cutscenes. I don't know why I love this, it's just one of many examples of random jank that gives this game flavor. Downtown is one of the best hub areas in gaming history and I will die on this hill. There's just so much going on in this small area. The bar where the rebellious anarchs hang out, the abandoned hospital where the flesh-eating La Garaja vampire Pisha lurks, the Skyline apartment complex which is supposed to be upscale but looks grimy as hell, and how could I forget about this church-turned-golf club? Still, it's not the best hub in Bloodlines, but we'll talk about that later. I love the Tremere chantry. So for a bit of context, civilized kindred distrust, fear and respect Tremere in equal measure because the clan's founders, who were mages, became vampires through a blood magic ritual. So they're considered artificial vampires. Anyways, as keepers and pursuers of dangerous forbidden knowledge, it's no wonder why kindred view Tremere as creepy occultists. And the Tremere Haven in downtown lends a lot of credibility to their reputation, as simply reaching the Primogen's office requires visitors to traverse a twisted labyrinth. This was clearly intentional, kinda like how the Nosferatu have set up shop in the deepest parts of the sewers to force non-Nosferatu, particularly the Vein Toreador, to literally waddle through piss and shit to reach them. That being said, no matter how hard I try, I can't take Maximilian Strauss seriously. He's supposed to be the primogen of a clan of sinister vampire blood mages, but that freaking blade outfit, man, it's so extra. I absolutely love Fat Larry.
Player, what's the score? How they hang? Good evening and all that commotion. Welcome to Fat Larry's Trucker Mac, the only store for all your needs after 10 o'clock. I am the proprietor and salesman of the month several years in a row. The ladies call me, oh God, but you can call me Fat Larry with a F-A-T, cause I know I got a weight problem, I just don't give a fuck. Counterfeit? Man, I look like one of those peanut-headed rock-smoking brothers selling SHACK shirts they made at their mama's house. I'm the real deal OG man in the alley with what you need. Counterfeit. Man, why you gotta be like that? Nah, that's what I like to hear. But it's like this. I save my best stuff for select clientele. Now, that don't mean I don't appreciate your business. It's just, you know, business.
I love how the Anarchs and Camarilla mirror each other. The Camarilla fashioned themselves as a respectable institution whose goal is to preserve the Masquerade and the secrecy of the kindred. As such, they like to maintain the illusion of a united front. The Anarchs are a loose group of rebels that reject the Camarilla, and for that reason, you'd think their group would be logically marred by infighting. But it's actually the other way around. The Camarilla is marred by infighting, while the Anarchs, whose members adhere to numerous ideologies, are more capable of putting aside their differences and working towards a common goal. I love that Lacroix, for all his self-importance, decided that putting this goofball in charge of his HQ security was a good idea. Speaking of this goofball, this scene kills me every time I watch it. Because the hubs are so small, quest givers and quest locations are very close to each other, often to a comical degree. For example, Maximilian Strauss has you deal with a vampire death cult, which is right across the street from his crib. Speaking of the vampire death cult, their lair has to be one of the most disgusting locations I've seen in a video game. Okay, Andre's Hollywood Mansion too, I can't decide between the two. I love this awkward pose that NPCs strike when they're on the defensive. Sadly, it has the unfortunate effect of minimizing the impact of darker moments, but what are you gonna do? I love that after witnessing his entire camera crew getting massacred in the abandoned hospital, Milligan decided to hide, of all places, in his hotel right across the street in the wardrobe. This is also an unintended consequence of the small world. things are much closer to each other than they should be. I love the ambiguity surrounding the abandoned hospital's demise. All the equipment inside looks modern and all the furnishings are still in place, which indicates that the hospital had fallen out of use suddenly and recently, given that it hadn't been looted by Bloodlines' events. I wonder whether Troika had something more planned for this hospital that didn't make the cut, or if it's simply a case of reusing assets to save money and time. I love how even the most luxurious locations in Bloodlines have a grimy edge to them, like the Empire Arms Hotel in downtown. By accessing the hotel's guest registry, you can track each guest's purchases. You will notice that one of the guests hasn't ordered anything, despite being booked for the next month. It's a cool hint that there's something more to this guest than meets the eye. Turns out, the guest in question is a disease-spreading vampire called Jezebel Loke, a member of the Brotherhood of the Ninth Circle, a vampire blood cult. Also, I love that despite being a minor character, there's a lot of lore and interesting details to be found in Jezebel Loke, if you know where to look. I'm not gonna spoil them. I love that the crack house where the Brotherhood of the Ninth Circle is headquartered has a reception area manned by a dude who asks visitors whether they are enlightened. The crack house in question seems to have been a fancy, roaring 20s high society sort of place in its heyday, which begs the question, did this traveling pack of crazed nomad cultists who purposely infect victims with a deadly disease set up shop in the first dilapidated building they stumbled into, or did they choose this one specifically because it had a reception area? If it's the latter, I really want to meet the person who's in charge of the cult's operations department. Dividing your days between infecting victims and handling the logistical side of this racket must take some crazy compartmentalization skills. I love how awkward NPC fights look in this game. I love how the writers base the vampires' various motivations and ideologies on real historical events that impacted them on a personal level. For example, Nines Rodriguez's anti-authority outlook was caused by his living through the worst of the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, when he saw unscrupulous businessmen getting insanely wealthy by exploiting the people who were fleeing southern and midwestern United States to seek a better life in California. Also, can we give some props to Nines? He's nothing but a homie throughout the game. He saves your ass not once, but twice, and assumes the role of occasional mentor to you. Sure, he has his own agenda, after all you're more useful to the Anarch movement as a spy in the Camarilla than dead, but in his defense, he intervened in your execution in good faith. I love this small fourth wall breaking moment.
Boys, I think we could all use a little entertainment. Those of you sitting in the first few rows will get wet.
I love how absolutely unhinged Damsel is. She warms up to you though, if you do the Anarch's bidding of course. I love how Smiling Jack is an enigma even amongst the Anarchs. I love this big stupid sign in La Crosse building. If this doesn't say all there is to say about his narcissism, I don't know what else could do that. Speaking of stupid things, how did Boris Chekhov make it to the top of the Russian mob with that hairstyle? Hollywood is the best hub in Bloodlines. Though thinner in content than Santa Monica and Downtown, I think it's the most thematically cohesive out of Bloodlines' 4 hubs. Its glitz and glamour are violently contrasted by the filth, sleaziness, and in some cases evil that lurks beneath the facade. Its theme song, written by Rick Schaefer, encapsulates this idea of a place where innocent, doe-eyed young adults flock in search of fame and fortune, only to wither away in a dead-end job after failing to make their mark in the movie industry, fall victim to some supernatural forces, or make it but realize it was a monkey's paw all along. There is a celebrity database in an internet cafe that the player can access to delve into Hollywood's dark history. It's a nice bit of world building that has always struck me in how naturally it's integrated in the game. Speaking of the internet cafe, doesn't this bring you back? I love Isaac Abrams. He is one of my favorite characters of all time. He's a vampire movie producer who has shaped Hollywood's film industry from the shadows pretty much since its inception. I also love that despite being a socialite movie producer toreador, Isaac Abrams is, at his core, an old-fashioned guy. He's the only kindred who demands a tribute from the fledgling in order to give them the information that they needed. I love that for all the game's dark and moody tone, it never takes itself too seriously. Take this quest where you can convince Ash Rivers to switch clothes with a lookalike to escape vampire hunters. It's so stupid, but it somehow works. Some problems require sitcom solutions, I guess. Also, Ash Rivers is definitely a reference to River Phoenix, as both were rising star actors who had died young of drug intoxication. Another interesting similarity is that River Phoenix died outside a nightclub called the Viper Room, while Ash owns a club called the Asp Hole. Plus, you know, their names. Ash Rivers, River Phoenix. Anyways. Also, I love how the game handled Isaac and Ash's relationship. It's complicated. So Ash was Isaac's protege in his acting days. However, one night, Ash suffered an OD, forcing Isaac to embrace Ash to save his life. Ash resented Isaac for this because he was forced to retire from acting and spend the rest of his unlife as a club owner, a shadow of his former glory. I love that this clerk in Hollywood figured that the best way to fund his music career was to sell weapons under the counter. I could listen to Velvet's smoky voice all day.
Isn't this better? You and me alone, for just a little while. Away from jihad and the nonsense, and the dangers, just the two of us. I don't want to spoil the moment, but there's a reason I needed to speak to you alone. Let's.
I also love that Velvet Velour lets only her close friends call her Vivi. Velvet is also one of the few merciful vampires, and the only vampire in Bloodlines that can be considered good. Flynn Boyle, the owner of the peep show / adult shop in Hollywood, is... let's just say it takes some incredible writing skills to make a pervert like him funny. Funnily enough, he calls the Vesuvius, Velvet Velour's classy strip club, second-rate smut. Dude, have you seen where you work? I love that the story accounts for your chosen clan via unique dialogue lines. I love how renowned and snobby food critic Tommy Flayton is just a pawn in Lacroix's machinations. Basically, Lacroix made an offer to the Cavoletti Cafe, which they refused, so you have to convince Tommy Flayton to write a bad review in retaliation. This is... look, you'd think an insanely powerful 300-year-old vampire who hung out with the likes of Napoleon would be more subtle, but no. Looks like Lacroix is not above petty revenge. I love how Bloodlines lets you indulge in your vampire power fantasy, only to pull the rug from under your feet in the third hub. That's when the player is recognized in public by a friend from before they had been turned into a vampire. The timing of this character's introduction is brilliant, as by that point you will have probably forgotten that you were once human. She is a reminder of your lost humanity, and the saddest thing is that the only sensible choice is to tell her she's made a mistake, otherwise you risk putting your friend's life in danger. I love this cheeky jump scare in the museum. I love this angry gargoyle and the branching questline Troika designed around him. I've talked about it in my Bloodlines analysis. Wink wink. Can we just take a moment and appreciate this moment of outstanding writing and voice acting?
Writer's such a tarnished term, you know what I mean? It's like every other guy says he's a writer, right? Like, you write a letter, you're a writer, you know? It's like, what I do, that's screenwriting. Like, I encapsulate the essence of excellent film in my scripts, all right? Like, I'm like a blacksmith with pens, all right? I'm a welder of montage. Does a writer write, or does he just, like, ink the flotsam and jetsam floating in his subconscious into a 120-page piece of film genius? But, you know, most of my subconscious is filled with old horror films, so that's what I write mostly, I guess. I love that Bloodlines' story is effectively one long practical joke at Lacroix's expense. Lacroix sends you on a mission to die almost immediately after he spared your life to save face following Nines' intervention. It was dumb luck that you survived, as the Sabbath wasn't at the warehouse. Your survival triggers a domino effect during which you not only survive every trap laid out for you, but you become Lacroix's most competent agent and a legend in the vampire world. I also love that if the fledgling has high enough persuasion, you can manipulate Lacroix to pay you extra for an errand. Even though he'd planned to betray you from the very start, he just can't stand the thought of other vampires saying he underpays his cronies. Additionally, if you pass a specific skill check and get Beckett to open up to you, the game gives you 2 XP points. Imagine how closed off a person Beckett must be if the game rewards you with 2 whole XP points for gaining his trust. I love the general concept behind Nosferatus.
that they're monstrous looking vampires who turn their isolation from civilized vampire society to their advantage by becoming de facto spy masters and information brokers. They're incredibly tech savvy, going so far as to create an entire internet of their own. Moreover, Nosferatu are known to embrace physically attractive people who are cruel as punishment. Funnily, Nosferatus have a derogatory term to describe them: Cleopatras. Bloodlines features one such Cleopatra in the form of Emalia. As a human, Emalia was a selfish and vain supermodel. As a Nosferatu, Emalia became miserable and spiteful, so much so that she asks the fledgling to plant 3 wireless cameras in a former rival's apartment to destroy her career. However, not all Nosferatu were horrible individuals prior to being embraced. The clan is also known to target social outcasts with kind natures. Meet Mitnick the hacker, who comments that since being turned, he has everything he needs and that he wasn't that good looking as a human anyway. For him, being a Nosferatu is an upgrade. I love Gary Golden. I don't know, there's just something so cool about this idea of a handsome old Hollywood star turned into a Nosferatu. Funnily, Gary might be a Cleopatra too, judging by his background, which makes the whole Emalia situation doubly ironic as he was the one who embraced her. I love Mercurio's little joke here. I love how the Triad boss's machismo all but evaporates when he realizes you can't be killed because, well, you're not quite human. The Fu Syndicate mission has low-key grown on me over the years. I used to dislike it, but now I get it. Its purpose is to show the player how much they've grown in power over the course of the game. Here's this scientist slash vampire hunter luring vampires to his testing grounds to find the most efficient method of killing them, only for you to render his experiments useless and destroy his little project. Ming Zhao, the leader of the Kuei-jin in Los Angeles, is one of the most infuriatingly well written characters I've seen in a video game. Her mocking and belittling you only to gaslight you into thinking she was polite when you strike back is... Speaking of infuriating characters, I love that there's like 3 or 4 ways to get inside the Giovanni mansion. One involves scamming an intoxicated couple idling in the front yard. Speaking of which, I love the Giovanni mansion. Like absolutely everything related to this location. Here's one: the fact that you can partake in some good old-fashioned social engineering by pitting the Giovanni cousins against each other and decide who gets the gift from the Giovanni patriarch. I love that even the characters whose quest lines you'd finished have no dialogue lines on revisits. I love that the serial killer quest line spans 3 hubs, culminating into a confrontation that results in 3 different outcomes. I love that failed seduction attempts result in some hilarious lines. I love that Bloodlines never quite explains this shop owner's true nature. The game implies he's a sort of amoral trickster entity, but whether he's a supernatural being or just an evil dude is left unclear. And finally, I love the lack of piss physics in Bloodlines. And that'll be it for this video. Let me know if you want to see similar videos in the future, and of course, leave a comment below with your favorite Bloodlines moments. Thanks for watching. As always, a special thank you to my wonderful patrons whose generosity makes these videos possible. I'll see you next time.